Hello everyone and welcome back to POLYCOSM. This is Omercan and today we are going over last week's render and bringing the concept of fully painted finish. Let's get started. Here's the base render I'll be working with, and Christina provided me with some masks along with this render. And those masks, man, they're coming in so handy throughout this whole process. You will see I'll be using them quite a bit. They really speed up the process from beginning to end. Even in the later stages when you're putting in the finishing touches, these masks really help a lot. I start off by establishing a base value separation within the gun. That means certain parts of the weapon are going to be darker in value, other parts are going to be lighter, some parts are going to be more kind of mid-value. This is what I focus on before I go into any kind of coloring. Once I have that down, I start adding color by using adjustment layers and blending modes such as overlay and color. Overlay and color blending modes are, at least for me, the ones that give the best results. Sometimes when you're trying to apply a color, it might not quite come out right in color mode. That's when I try the overlay mode, see if that brings a better result. And you can go back and forth between different layers. It doesn't really matter. You can have 10 different layers that you use to lay down the base colors. It really doesn't matter at this stage. As long as you get as close as you can to the color you're looking for, that's the important thing. The render Christina has provided me with has already some light information on it, so I'm trying to use this to my advantage as much as possible. I have a pretty good idea on where the main light source is going to be, so I start by establishing the highlights. This is the point where I also start to think about the temperature of my light areas and my shadow areas. For this piece, I want my main light source to be cool. That will mean, to complement that, my shadow areas will have to be warmer. To establish this relation of cool and warm between the light and dark areas, I start by going over the highlights with a light blue color. I basically create a new layer, set that layer to soft light blending mode. Then I go over the highlights with this light blue color, and just by doing that, the shadow areas will automatically start to look warmer in comparison. Here, I decided to bring in the jellyfish and drop some color on it. By the way, Christina has a new video coming up soon on how she used some of Blender's new sculpting tools to sculpt this jellyfish, so make sure you check those out. I mean, I'm already kinda sick of listening to her just gush about how the Blender sculpting tools are amazing and this and that, but I'm pretty sure some of you guys will find those interesting. I'm starting to zoom in now and focus on the edges and the bounce light. The edge quality, especially when you're working on a 3D render, is very important. You don't want everything to be super sharp and straight and cleanly defined. You know, when you look around you, the objects that we have around us, they rarely have these super straight and sharp edges that 3D models tend to have. So as you're painting over this, you gotta keep that in mind. Adding some personality like dents, scratches, rounded edges really bring these things to life. And yes, you might have noticed it right there, I have started to drop in some photo textures. Yes, I am a big fat cheater. Of course, I'm joking. Photo textures can save you considerable amounts of time during the process of creating concept art, so it's fairly common practice to use them. You gotta be careful about how you use them though. You don't wanna just drop in the photo and just flatten out the whole form. The way texture reacts to light is very specific, and you have to try to imitate that as much as possible. A good rule that I try to follow is to make sure the texture is most prominent where the form is dramatically shifting from light to dark. So in your shadow areas and in your light areas, you don't want the texture to be strongly prominent. Most of the time especially in the shadows, I erase it out. But as the form is starting to turn from the shadow into light, that's where you are going to see the most amount of texture. As you can see, now I'm dropping in some stickers, some decals, having some fun, adding some personality to this weapon. Just because this is a weapon design doesn't mean that it cannot have a personality or it cannot tell a story. It absolutely can, and you should try to do that as much as you can. I wanted to slow down here to show you how I use photo textures in a little bit more detail. I like to blur the photo just a tiny bit to get rid of its sharpness, which can look a little artificial. Soft light mode tends to work best as the layer blending mode, but always feel free to experiment with other blending modes and see what sort of results you get. I adjust fill and opacity settings until I get something I like the look of, and I always paint over the texture layer to blend it further into the painting. Now, we're about to see a very dramatic change in the overall color scheme. What happened was that I showed my progress to Christina, and she hated the color palette, right? She called me some really nasty words that I'd rather not repeat here, and sent me a variation of her own. And the problem is, I wasn't quite happy with her variation either. So I tweaked her version and tried to come to a compromise that's something both of us would like. And this is it. As you can see, I had to make a lot of changes, but well, you know what? Those masks she provided me with at the very beginning, they came in really handy. All I had to do was make some selections, add some hue adjustment layers, tweak things around, and yeah, finally came to this color scheme that we are both really happy with. That was a pretty realistic scenario, by the way. It is not uncommon for you to be working on something and the client or the art director just changes their mind for whatever reason. And now you have to make a bunch of changes with the clock ticking. This can happen fairly often. At times like this, it is important not to get too attached to your work. Many times clients wanted to go with certain choices that I did not personally liked, but at the end of the day, you are creating this concept for them. In our case, we were creating this concept as a team, Christina and I together. So sometimes you have to leave your personal preferences behind and be a professional. This is the last stretch now. I'm basically just adding finishing touches and getting the concept ready for presentation. I thought a dark background worked better in this case, and I wanted to add a rim light as well because, well, rim lights are just the best. I love them and I definitely overuse them. But we all have our vices, don't we? Besides all that, I want to make sure the edges are clean and I don't want any rogue pixels floating around. I just wanted to thank everyone who stuck with us since the beginning of this project. Thank you guys so much. We had a lot of fun working on this, and we hope you did as well while watching. We are quite happy how this turned out and cannot wait to start working on our next idea. And here we are, this is it, the final concept art for the Jellyfier. Yeah, looking at this now, I'm very happy with how it came out. There's always room for improvement of course, but I think this concept stands on its own pretty well. I enjoyed this whole process and I hope you guys learned as much as we have while working on this. Once again guys, thank you very much for watching this, for tagging along, for supporting us, for following along this tutorial. Just make sure if you like this to subscribe, share it with others. And if there was anything you didn't like, please let us know. We are always looking for ways to improve our output. We'll see you next week. Bye everyone.